Okay, so I'm back recording. I'm going to jump back. So die1 and die2 are now aliases of each other. So that means die1 is pointing to whatever object die2 was pointing to. So now if I go from above and I copy, I'm going to copy those 2 lines of code. I'm going to paste it underneath, but I'm going to rename something. I'm going to change the ANS to say ANS1. And then when I print, I'm going to print ANS1, but I'm going to also change my message. I'm going to say equals when die are aliases. Now, when you run that program, tell me what happens this time. It's true. So that's how the equals method works from the object class. That means all objects will work this way unless we do something like override what is in the equals method within a class. So that's what I want to do now. I want to, for the die class, to create our own equals method. And what do we think it means for 2 die to be equal to each other? How would we do it? How do you want to do it? By the same face value? That sounds like a good idea. So what we're going to do is I'm going to jump over. I'm going to actually start a new notepad, and I'm going to copy the die class in there. That seems to be working better. So give me a moment. All right, I can make this a little bigger. So right now we have a parameter called face value. That's probably something that we can use. So we have all these methods already in place, but we're going to add one called equals. And what's really important here is that the header for the method needs to be exactly the same as what's in the object class so that it can override the equals method. That's super important. If we don't do that, it's not going to work correctly. So all I did was make my font bigger. So I'm going to go down near the bottom, but before the toString method, so I'm following the Java norms. And I'm going to type out the method header for the equals method. Public Boolean equals object obj. And I'm going to put in my starting bracket, and I'm going to put in my closing bracket. And I'm going to put in some extra space underneath there only so people in the back can see. This is the method we're working on. So hopefully everybody can see that. Now I'm going to jump to my camera real fast. Or I'm going to, I guess, bring that in the mix. Bringing it in the mix. Bringing it in the mix. Uh-oh. Sorry, my bad. So I'm going to go down to the bottom a little bit. So it's really important for us to understand this very first step in the program. In the method header, we're saying we're sending an object. So I'm just going to draw a visual. An object that I am referring to as obj. And I want to compare it to a die. Does everybody agree? So in our example, die1 is pointing to an object because in our driver, we can say die1 equals die2, right? So die1 calls the method. Die2 is actually what we're sending to the method. This is the formal parameter, And then this would be the actual parameter. I didn't get those backwards, did I? Did I get those backwards? Yeah, I think I got that backwards. Yeah, the driver's the actual parameter. I got it backwards. And when I send it to the method, it's the formal parameter. Now, visually, I'm trying to see if these two are equal to each other. But this is a case of trying to compare apples to oranges. Am I trying to compare one type of object to its same type of object? I'm trying to compare an object from the object class to a die from the die class. That's not going to work. The only way equality will really work is if I take this OBJ from the object class and cast it to be a die object. So we learned about casting last year. So this has got to be the most important step when you write an equals method. It will also be important when we write something called the compare to method. So the very first thing is that we're going to do inside of the equals method is we're going to create a reference variable. We're going to say die, and we could just call it D. We're going to create the reference variable. And then in the next step, or we could do this all in one step. We're going to say let D equal this object that I'm sending, OBJ, but now I have to cast it to be a die object. And this will work because all objects are descendants from the object class. So these two steps are really important. If you don't like writing it that way, you could write it all in one step. You could say die D equals die object, OBJ. So now inside of the class, I can refer to the object that called me as this. And inside the class, inside the method equals, I can refer to the other object, OBJ, now as D, inside of here. So I'm going to go back to my method that I'm coding, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to say die D, and then in the next step, I'm going to say D equals die OBJ. So now I can compare apples to apples. So Hussein said we're going to compare die objects based on whether or not their face values are the same, correct? Does everybody agree? In our class for the die object, do we have an accessor method for face value? We do. It's called get face value. So what I can do is I can create, and that's an integer, I can create two integers, integer x1 and x2. Then I can, for each object, like D, I can say x2 equals D dot get face value. That will store the face value of one die. And then in x1, I can refer to the other die as this. So going back to my image camera, in the driver, I said die1 dot equals die2. So inside the equals method, when I say this, I'm referring to die1. Inside the equals method, when I say D, I'm referring to die2. So inside of the equals method, I say this dot get face value. So now I have both of the integer face values stored in these variables, x1 and x2. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop my video again.